listening to Rouge Radio, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
It's time to get the point as Rouge Radio is ready to kick off.
Ready!
The best football talk with the best in the business.
So what is the cost? You have 2 first-round picks this year because the Argos are dumb enough to trade for Drew Willy.
A few rookies.
We go directly to the on-field product. We welcome to the show the 20th overall pick in this past Sunday's CFL draft, DeAndre Wright of the Alouettes. DeAndre, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
And the occasional Hall of Famer.
Please welcome Doug Brown, who is one of the members of the current class of 2016 in the CFL Hall of Fame. Doug, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you guys for the kind words and for having me on the program.
Rouge Radio is on the air. Here's your hosts, Robert Dalton and Tony Allen.
We are live for another edition of the Rouge Radio podcast, episode 459. Can you believe that we've done that many in our lives? It's the Rouge Radio podcast powered by the Canadian Football Podcast Network. My name is Robert Dalton. If you're watching this live, if you're watching this live on YouTube, if you're watching this live on Twitter, you can see it. You can see the Twitter handles. You could, if you're interested in the social, you can follow us on Twitter at Rouge Radio. You can follow myself at Rouge Dalton. Let me get the camera. Yeah, okay, there we go. And of course, my good friend Tony Allen at Tony Rouge. Tony, how's it going, my man?
Good. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. I love it. We're coming in clear. Everything's clear because we have a final two after 23 weeks of the regular season, of the playoffs. A lot of action, a lot of drama throughout the 2022 season, but it all comes down to this. This is what it all comes down to for the 109th Grey Cup. There we go. Oh, okay. You went total Rob Lowe and decided to not go for a particular team. You just went all CFL-y.
Great Cup.
There we go.
109.
If you're just watching or if you're just listening to this and you're not getting the video of this, you can just see that Tony has it's Saskatchewan, so that's a bunny hug, right?
Yes, we're both wearing bunny hugs today. I have
mine's a little team specific.
Yes, you're wearing a retro Arizona Coyotes hoodie, and I'm wearing my souvenir hoodie from when I went to Mosaic Stadium.
Oh yeah, that's right. You did travel there. Okay, I completely forgot about
two
that.
Games. I saw Riders Elks and Riders Lions.
Yeah.
I was in the stands when Nathan Rourke got injured.
And I was nearby when Nathan Rourke made an appearance in the Western Final. Obviously, we'll talk more about the divisional finals as we get towards previewing the 109th Grey Cup. A lot of storylines going into this game. A lot of them just for statisticians, who believe in history repeating themselves or whatnot. But life is good. We've got 2 more of these shows this year until we just shut it down.
Yeah,
I'm gonna miss this.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna lie though. I'll probably next week's show I'll probably mail in pretty hard. It'll just be thanks for the year. I'm out for Christmas. Christmas holidays.
Now obviously I'm just going to hold you to it because you're going to have to do the show, especially if the Bombers win. But if the Argos win, we could be like, yeah, the Argos won.
Yeah,
and that'll do it.
Yeah, they have won the Grey Cup.
I'm joking. What's funny is that the Toronto Argonauts. I said this last week because they seem like they coasted all the way through the East.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't it feel like there's no internal story? Like with Winnipeg, everybody they want to be the team that beats the Bombers because that is the team to beat. Mm-hmm. With BC, they had they missed the playoffs last year. They had a second-year starter coming in. With Montreal, they had Gary Stern, Trevor Harris, Danny, all that internal. Like Toronto just
was there,
existed. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
it just seems like.
But the thing is, they went wire to wire in the East.
Yeah.
To me, it was when I was watching that East final, and I was thinking about what you're saying about how, they just almost like they accidentally got there or they didn't care about getting there. But then when the chips were down, they went out and won the football game. Like they were the better football team. Bethel McLeod Thompson was the better quarterback. He looked like a good quarterback, and they were a better team. It got interesting, like Montreal made it interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, Toronto was straight up the better team. And I think just put a point on maybe we weren't always the best, but we were the best team in the East, and we proved it again today.
It's funny because in both games, never really thought that the game was like the game. Always felt that the other team wasn't going to, like, obviously BC, there's that hint of them making a comeback because it's Nathan Rourke.
Mm-hmm.
But you just never got a sense that BC was going to get back into that game.
No, never really.
The same thing with that game, and then Montreal made it interesting. Don't get me wrong. And what I'll say about that, you know what? And it's funny. Maybe when we do our little memoriam for Trevor Harris, is or for Montreal, is that Toronto did a excellent job defensively, minimizing what Montreal had available to them. It seemed like they had William Stanback. They were using Walter Fletcher throughout the season, right, the latter stages of the season and last week's playoff game. But Toronto did their best to say, no, we're going to try to make Trevor Harris beat us through the air. And credit to Trevor Harris, he almost did. And I thought that was kind of, maybe that was, we didn't believe too much in Trevor Harris. I mean, I feel bad because both of us, I selected Montreal to win last week. I can't remember what you did, but it was kind of like Trevor Harris really surprised us, and almost to the point where you legitimately thought that Montreal was going to make a play of it and surprise everybody in the latter stages. But Toronto just did what they had to do just to make sure that everything was out of reach in case the one play that didn't need to happen happened. But I thought the Toronto game was just their offense or their defense. Yeah, McLeod Bethel Thompson, excellent proficiency with running the offense in the first half. But I thought this game was all Toronto defense, really making sure that if they were going to get beat, it was going to be through the air and not through the running through the ground attack. I don't know if you thought the same way.
Well, no, it's pretty close, and I think it was a fun game to watch Andrew Harris have a great football game too. He came back and seemingly just picked up where he left off, and there was times it's like he'll make the conversation interesting in the Grey Cup if Toronto can give Winnipeg a run for their money. He looks strong, and he'll be another just added on to the pile of storylines that we have going into this Grey Cup postseason, because we haven't been short on any of them after the whole halftime show fiasco, which now nobody cares about because they made the announcement after making a big deal about how there was no announcement. The announcement's been made and the whole thing's been forgotten about because we don't care.
Yeah.
Proving me and everyone right that we just don't care about the halftime show. It was a story for the sake of making up a story about the Canadian Football League, because that halftime show announcement could have been Shawn Mendes. It could have been what we got. It could have been Tate McRae.
I don't know
who
those
made,
guys are.
Nobody cares. Yeah.
I don't know if you made up a name or
no, Calgary, Tate McRae. You don't know Tate McRae from Calgary?
No.
Oh my gosh, crazy.
I feel like that was like a ceremonious name drop that only people from Calgary know.
No, only young, hip, progressive people like me, young youths like me.
Jordan Davis, who's one of the trio that's performing at halftime show. He's from Shreveport.
Really?
I really want him to show up at the halftime show wearing a Shreveport Pirates jersey.
Well, he has to.
I'm
sure the Gleibermans have a sea can full of them somewhere.
Okay, so we covered.
There's
the,
my name drop, Gleberman.
Any more thoughts of the Eastern Final before we move forward?
No, they weren't. I mean, the Toronto. If Montreal had come back to even tie it, I think we had a classic game on our hands. I thought it was a very entertaining football game. Like we definitely glazed over that and forgot to mention out of the two, because you mentioned, it was never in doubt. But if Montreal had an opportunity to come back and even just tie it, that would have been an instant Grey Cup playoff classic. That was
ESPN
an
classic.
entertaining football game. It was thoroughly enjoyable from the first quarter to the fourth quarter. It wasn't one of those, there was nothing in the first three quarters and then all the points were scored in the fourth quarter, so we call it a classic. I'm looking at you, 1989 Grey Cup.
It just seems like both games on Sunday were extremely entertaining, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
Before we get to the Western Final, what's now, like what now for Montreal? Like what do they have to do in the offseason to get that next step to go show up in the Grey Cup final? Because they haven't been there since 2010, since they last actually won the Grey Cup back in 2010. Like what do they need to do?
I wish I had the answer to that one, because they look like a team that could go either way. Like their status quo right now, I'm not sure what they need to take that extra step. I don't know if they have enough talent and they need a head coach who can get the most out of that talent. I don't know if they need a few more years of the whole crew gelling and letting them develop. I've never been a Trevor Harris guy. I think their goal needs to be a get away from Trevor Harris and their dependency on him, because I don't know, ever since he's been given the tag of the man after Ottawa, he's never ever lived up to it. He had a couple other trips to the Grey Cup, but he fell flat on his face in those, and then he's never gotten back. So if I'm Montreal, I think one of the things is, where's my next quarterback going to come from? Do I want to make a legitimate run at Bo Levi Mitchell if the Hamilton thing falls through? And obviously we'll talk about that later, but
yeah, we're talking about Montreal. Yeah.
But I mean, for the purposes of Montreal, I think if I'm them, how I like some of the players I have, whether you can tweak them, because they're not progressing up and they're not progressing down. It's more laterally they're going across, and they need something that's going to decide what brings them up. And I think getting away from Trevor Harris would be a good start.
When Montreal hits the field next year, Trevor Harris will be 37. I'm not too sure. Trevor Harris, a 37-year-old Trevor Harris should be the guy going into 2023, especially when behind him, Dominic Davis, who knows what's going to happen with him in the backup role. Dominic Davis in the backup role isn't really an issue. Your backup guy should have some experience, and the drop-off shouldn't be that harsh. But obviously they need to get a head coach in play, because Danny Maciocia, that discipline issue just is still rearing its ugly head, and we saw a lot of it in the Eastern Final. But when we're talking about with Montreal, obviously you need a head coach. You need a smart head coach, one that can get the most out of their players, but at the same time, it needs to get the most sensible time out of their players, because if they go in the next season with the same discipline issues, that team's not going to go they're not going to go far. Talent can only go as far away if you're not going to play smart. And there's other organizations in this league that are proof positive of that. Anything else of Montreal before we go forward?
No, I'm good with them.
All right. The Western Final, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in IG Field defeated the BC Lions with Nathan Rourke by a score of 28-20. That score flatters the BC Lions in probably a lot of people's opinions. But I mean, wasn't like Winnipeg's offense was running on all cylinders, but it just seems like it was a little bit better than what BC's was. But what I mentioned earlier is that it was entertaining for different reasons than the Eastern Final. It was like the Western Final last year, except nobody wanted it, but the turnovers were on both sides. Nathan Rourke, his mechanics were throwing way off. He got picked off twice. Zach Claros, another end zone pick when you didn't need to throw it that deep. And of course, with the Janarian Grant, fumbling, resulting in a touchdown for BC, and then he just redeemed himself like a quarter later with a 80-somewhat punt return for a touchdown. It was like the score that you expected, but now not how you imagine it happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
like
first off,
BC's biggest play only being 2 points.
Yeah, exactly.
The groundbreaking play for BC, and it's only worth 2 points.
Yeah. I feel bad that Terry Williams runs at 120 yards or whatever he did. And he had to actually go out for the next play because it was a kick return or it was a kickoff because Winnipeg actually had scored a touchdown at that point. But poor MFer. Nathan Rourke, thoughts on his play, because I don't have the stats, but that first 3 quarters, horrible.
Yeah, he was not. It was my fear when we did the show last week that are you sending the best Nathan Rourke out to succeed because he, was still hampered with that foot against the Calgary Stampeders. He got the job done, and I think we saw the best Nathan Rourke we were going to get under the circumstances. It was, if we go back to week 16 or 17 when they made the announcement, or I guess maybe later on 18, and I said, is this what we need to do? Be rushing Nathan Rourke back for a playoff race that you don't really need to win. It'd be nice to get your best guy out there. We forced Nathan Rourke, I think, back in for the sake of seeing what Nathan Rourke could do. And I think he was just the victim of coming back too early. He's a good quarterback. Maybe at 100%, we would have had a different outcome. But I think that's the best Rourke was going to do, recovering from the injury. To think his foot was 100%. And I'm not saying Winnipeg didn't beat him straight up. Winnipeg was the better team on the day. Nobody's going to question that, and I don't want anyone thinking that I'm saying a Nathan Rourke at 100% would have changed the outcome of the football game. I think we just saw the best we were going to get out of Nathan Rourke on the day, and his opponent didn't help his situation either.
If we look defensively, a lot of dropped interceptions too on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that really stood out for me is the Winnipeg running game. Like, one of the things that everybody was talking about going into this year was when Andrew Harris was released, or not released, allowed to walk through free agency. Everybody said, well, you're not going to get the same productivity. And who's to say what Andrew Harris would have come up with in this game? But Brady Oliveira, 20 carries, 130 yards, 6.5 yards per carry. His longest was 20. Not bad, especially when you compare to his counterpart in BC, James Butler, 6 carries for 4 yards. Like how does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
Like the BC team as a whole was 28 yards rushing on 11 carries. And 10 of that was Nathan Rourke in the fourth quarter. Like, unbelievable. Like the run game, obviously that just goes down to Winnipeg being clearly the better team in the trenches on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. When you're able to limit your team in a game where you need to run and to have that much of an effect on the run game on the opposing team, and at the same time with that with that offensive line, giving your heir apparent to what Andrew Harris was last year, giving him the same productivity with that yards per carry, and having a heck of a game, leading Winnipeg to their third straight Grey Cup. And a lot of people are chiming in, wanting to chime in and saying, "Hey, how insufferable Daltz is right now." And I'm trying my best not to be insufferable.
No.
I'd like to think that I'm doing a good job not being insufferable. Now, wait till next week if the Bombers win.
Although you
Dynasty-
did find a way. You did find a way to bring up Andrew Harris leaving and how good their run game is without Andrew. That's kind of been our constant theme through the year. You wanting to reinforce Andrew Harris leaving wasn't that big of a deal. You've been trying to sell it all season. You brought it around again today. So good.
Well, I mean, throughout the whole season, it was kind of. I mean, the first 5-6 weeks, it didn't look good, right? You had. I mean, not like Andrew Harris was running; it was lights out. He was just putting up better yards per carry than Brady Oliveira at that time.
Yeah.
Once that offensive line kind of started gelling, I say gelling because they lost their starting center in week 2, and everything had to be regrouped. Like Winnipeg hit some injuries earlier on in the season and more long term than anything, but they started gelling, and with that gelling, they started getting more productivity out of that running game, and it clearly showed now. And then what looked like a projecting 800-yard rushing season for Brady Oliveira all of a sudden turned into a 1,000-yard rushing season. And the reason I go back to it is because it makes me look smart by saying that it was a good idea or a good decision by Kyle Walters and Bomber management by going younger as opposed to sticking with Andrew Harris and one of the 2 young running backs that they have. It's just smart business as far as I'm concerned, because you go with Johnny Augustine and Andrew Harris. Okay, well, you lose. Brady Oliveira's got a bright future, as he's showed, and they're going to let him run roughshod over you for years to come, because Andrew Harris' time in the CFL probably doesn't go further than 2022. I could be wrong. He's already started talking about retirement, or vice versa. If you go with Brady Oliveira and Andrew Harris and let Johnny Augustine walk and have the same thing. Both those young running backs are signed for 2-year deals. So they got this year and the next year, whereas we don't know what's going to happen with Andrew Harris. And likely you don't have that scenario next year if you keep Andrew Harris. So it was smart. And obviously he missed most of the year. It just goes to show. I was just maybe backing up my argument, showing that, hey, I was right. But
Yeah.
enough about me. Dynasty Daltz is a different kind of insufferable Daltz. If that happens, you haven't seen anything yet. Before we go forward, what now for BC? Because BC's got. Here's the thing, because we'll talk more about that in the future here. Nathan Rourke possibly going down south. Everybody said BC built this team perfectly because they're paying their quarterback literally peanuts, and now they're able to pay their big free agent acquisitions top dollar. Well, what's going to happen if Nathan Rourke goes down south? You're going to have to pay that next guy to go under center. He's not going to take peanuts. He's going to have to take a huge increase, which means you're going to suffer somewhere else. And if you're running the BC Lions, obviously you don't retool. There are going to have to be some tweaks here and there. Where do you make that tweak?
Yeah, I'm not sure, because I don't know what Vernon Adams' contract looks like if they've got a few more years of Vernon Adams in BC. But as Dalt quickly Googles Vernon Adams' contract,
yes.
The thing is, if he's got a couple of years left, I'm not that concerned. I think if I'm BC moving forward, you've got some good pieces. You've got a good start there. And if you need to spend a couple years letting Nathan Rourke figure out what he's going to do down south, I think Vernon Adams can take care of business in that absence. Now, depending if they don't have him and they've got to scramble now to find a quarterback, that make things a little bit different. And sure, if they've got to spend some money, that changes the argument. But overall, without having their pending free agency list in front of me and going in and complete dissecting the BC Lions future, I think right now you're okay. There's no need to panic in BC, and I don't see a sudden drop off into oblivion for the BC Lions in the next couple of years anyways.
Vernon Adams under contract for 2023. He restructured his contract prior to being traded to BC from Montreal. This may change, but he's currently slated to collect $25,000 active roster bonus for February 15th, and then earn 113 base salary with additional 13.5 in housing. This is, of course, due to Justin Dunk's reporting. So 151 hard money total for 2023 for Vernon Adams Jr. next year. Not a lot, but I'm guessing Vernon Adams may want to restructure that deal if he's going to be that guy. I mean, that in itself is an upgrade in contract to what Nathan Rourke was giving him. So you don't need to, but you've got to figure out at least one move to make. Do you want to drop a receiver to maybe upgrade the defensive line? Do you want to, or upgrade the linebacking core? Because one thing that you're going to one thing that you could take away from that final game is your run defense really wasn't as good as the stats brought him up to be, or your play isn't up to speed to what it takes to get past the Bombers to everybody's end goal, which is a Grey Cup appearance. Because like we talked about a couple of minutes ago, 6.5 yards per carry does not speak very positive for your run defense, especially to your front seven. So not a lot of retooling, but you got to figure out there's one move. You just got to figure out one guy that you really love that's it's heading towards free agent, and you've just got to make that tough decision to say, hey, we love you, but we have plans to go elsewhere and within our roster. Mm-hmm. Before we get to Grey Cup 109, some big news happened this week on Monday's show, or maybe was it yesterday? I don't know. But Bo Levi Mitchell, his rights, as he's going to entertain free agency, his rights were traded to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Now, I have to go into my belief is there was also a swap in first-round picks, but there's also a third-round pick in 2023, as well as a fifth round pick in the year 2024. Your thoughts on, because we knew that this was going to happen. The writing was on the wall when Jake Maier was going to be, when he was signed to that extension. But now it's kind of like reality sets in that Bo Levi Mitchell is no longer a Stampeder. First off, your thoughts on the actual trade itself.
It caught me so off guard because obviously there was a lot of speculating as soon as Maier got signed to a new contract that the writing was in the wall for Bo Levi Mitchell. And maybe you saw this coming, but to me, I feel the Canadian Football League fans, everyone as a whole, didn't anticipate a team jumping the gun like Hamilton did. I felt I never put Hamilton into the mix because I only ever saw this as Bo Levi Mitchell hitting the open market and the bidding war started. It caught me completely off guard that one team was going to jump the gun like this and offer assets to get the negotiating rights. So it's not that he got traded because he was leaving. We knew that. There's no shock value in Bo Levi Mitchell leaving anymore. There's kind of okay, he's finally gone. The only shock here for me is that there was a Canadian Football League team who is going to jump the gun for trading rights. That's the only thing that threw me off guard. And I guess to a degree that out of all the teams that were going to jump the gun, that it was going to be the Hamilton Tiger Cats, because you could try and outbid them. And unlike a community-owned team where maybe the money wasn't as is available. If a team was going to jump the gun, it was going to be one of those teams that needed to get out in front of everyone else and maybe schmooze Bo Levi Mitchell. But with Bob Young, it doesn't seem like the Tiger Cats are the team, if they wanted to make a play for Bo, would get out that far ahead. And if you're Dane Evans, you're just standing there like, Jesus, they really want to get rid of me. Like,
I've just been Fajardoed. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's like unbelievable. So my only shock value is that the Tiger Cats jumped the gun to have first shot at negotiating with Bo Levi Mitchell.
And what's really, you don't make this trade unless you have some kind of sense that you're going to strike a deal or an extension with the player. Bo Levi Mitchell came out earlier this week after the trade. In fact, it was yesterday that he is still hoping to test free agency. So Hamilton is going to be with. I mean, I'm not going to make this sound like it's that they gave up the prime portion of their future, but it's still a decent price to pay for nothing. Almost,
Yeah.
It seems kind of pointless. It's like they were under the impression, and I'm referring to Hamilton. They were under the impression that they had a deal that was willing to be signed, and just kind of got bamboozled for it. So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen there? But it just seems now all everybody came to Bo Levi Mitchell going to test free agency, and of course there's going to be a lot of people in Saskatchewan. They're like, see, he's going to sign with Saskatchewan. And let me put this out here. Bo Levi Mitchell isn't stupid. He's obviously to the tail end of his career, so he's probably got 1, maybe 2 years left of, I guess, prime BLM Bo Levi Mitchell. I don't think Bo Levi Mitchell is going to spend the last 2 years of his career with trying to get as much money out of a team, especially if you're Saskatchewan, who has been rumored to be wanting to open the vault for him. And then Bo Levi Mitchell sees that offensive line and be like, no, that's not worth $400K.
No.
No, I am going to be collecting $400K while on the IR for the entire season. That's how bad things are in Saskatchewan right now, especially with, it might be an improvement with the coaching changes over there, but if you're Bo Levi Mitchell, you're looking at each scenario, and I don't think that there is any kind of scenario that plays out where Saskatchewan's biggest fault is going to be improved enough to lure Bo Levi Mitchell out of free agency to Saskatchewan. But
yeah, he wants a Grey Cup. I don't, just based on his words, it almost felt like he doesn't want to go anywhere where he's got to compete for that first quarterback job. Like, I think he wants to go somewhere and be the man, but I think he wants to win cups. I don't think part of me feels like the Tiger Cats made an effort, and Bo said he's going to listen to their pitch. But honestly, this one feels like it's going to blow up in the Tiger Cats' face.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't see Bo Levi Mitchell signing in Hamilton. You have nothing to draw him there. He's spent his whole career out west. He's got a tattoo of the Rocky Mountains on his arm. He is, for all intents and purposes, a Western Canada boy. So Saskatchewan might have that going for him, but I think he wants to go out with at least one more Grey Cup, potentially over money. I think Saskatchewan's more of an option than Hamilton, but I honestly, if Rourke goes and holds a clipboard for 2 years, maybe Bo Levi Mitchell is their Band-Aid for that problem while he's gone. Even Edmonton, I wouldn't even put Edmonton past Bo Levi Mitchell, but This one feels like it is not going to work out for the Tiger Cats. I could be wrong. I mean, anything is possible. Hell, I didn't even think this trade was possible. I thought we'd be talking about Bo Levi Mitchell going straight to free agency. I didn't think anyone was going to do this. So anything is possible in this league. I just don't see this one working out for the Tiger Cats at the end of the day.
You want a bold prediction?
Yeah.
BC.
Yeah. Well, that's what I said too.
Yeah, a bold prediction would be BC or Toronto. Like he'll look at Toronto and be like, if Homer McLeod Thompson, I'll use your name for him, is able to get this Toronto team to the Grey Cup, who's to think that I can't give him? Like, obviously, I think it'll really depends. Toronto, if what they want to do really depends on what happens on Sunday. If Toronto stinks out the joint, I think that they probably go, okay, you know what, McLeod Bethel Thompson, you have sideline shenanigans. We're going to go a different route, but we're going to keep everything else the same, and we're going to go hardcore for Bo Levi.
Yeah.
But in BC,
and also sorry, go ahead.
When BC, if Nathan Rourke signs down south, I mean, it makes for a very, very wide open West Division. If you have Bo Levi Mitchell and Vernon Adams Jr., or even to the point where you could say Bo Levi Mitchell or Vernon Adams Jr., we're going to trade you to Saskatchewan, and we're going to recoup like maybe a pick and a special teams player or something like that. Like you could easily, like BC could easily do that. And knowing what BC has done this far compared to where they were in the last 2 years, it's feasible that Bo Levi Mitchell for the whole season. Now, a lot of this could contend on whether or not Nathan Rourke ends up going down south, but for hypothetical situation here, we're gonna go with the situation that he does go down south. Bo Levi Mitchell potential could make the Western Division, and with Chris Jones, I mean that Western Division could be like Winnipeg, BC, Calgary, Edmonton, all within shooting distance, and then Saskatchewan bringing up the rear in fifth place and being eliminated from postseason contention.
Yeah, and you need to remember, you've got a new owner in BC who's trying to drive up hype every week. He's trying to outdo himself. And what a feather in his cap would it be if he could replace a Canadian superstar in Nathan Rourke with an essential born-again Canadian in Bo Levi Mitchell. If you've ever heard how Bo Levi Mitchell speaks, you can tell he's from Texas and he loves his state of Texas, but that guy loves being a Canadian as well. And I mean, what an amazing move it would be if that BC Lions owner could just slot in Bo Levi Mitchell in that lineup. He's got a lot of reasons to make a hard play for Bo Levi Mitchell in the offseason.
And you know what? If you do that, we talked about earlier, you make that tough decision to let go of a guy that you really love. But if you sign Bo Levi Mitchell, it could make it a very popular attraction in free agency to sign a guy who fills a void somewhere else on your roster. And that would speak volumes. We talked about it earlier in the show. Nathan Rourke, after a Western final, has already have a couple of NFL tryouts in the next couple of weeks. Is this the beginning? First off, I want to ask you, is this do you think that this is the beginning of the end of Nathan Rourke in the CFL?
No, I don't. I definitely don't. And I'm not even sure anything is going to come out of these tryouts. It happens a lot. Players go down. We do lose them. I mean, he's getting I think the 21st and the 22nd are his first tryouts in the NFL. I think he'll get a look. I mean, I guess if Chris Streveler can get a contract after his run, it would be hard to say Nathan Rourke. And when I follow Twitter and when that announcement came out, obviously I don't know anything about Nathan Rourke's collegiate career, but when you see some of the stats and some of the history of Nathan Rourke in U.S. college, he had a good college career, impressive enough for people to remember that stuff. So I don't think we've seen the end of him. I think he will go down, have his moment, and if he's got to go for a couple of years, he will. But even if he sticks this season or next season, I suppose it is, we lose him for a couple of years, but I think eventually he'll come back. I don't think he will languish down in America longer than he has to.
And if he does stick, because one of the things that was kind of really low-hanging fruit on Twitter was it's bad for the league because he was a bright story in the CFL this year. To lose him after one season would almost be really depressing, especially if you're like trying to market the league. Like there was your one guy. Like Dalton Schoen, top rookie in the CFL this year. He's probably going to the NFL. But you lose Dalton Schoen, great player. Doesn't even hit the radar on marketable players in the CFL. You lose Nathan Rourke for a longer period. Yeah, that makes a bigger blip than I think a lot of us.
It's because of what position he plays. Like, if you lose Nathan Rourke, it's because he was a quarterback. That is everything. That's the whole argument.
Canadian quarterback.
In a nutshell. Yeah, he was a Canadian and he's a quarterback. That's what made him so spectacular. If it's Doug Flutie, if it's Jeff Garcia, then it's like, boy, it was fun having you. And we still got a couple seasons out of those guys and all the best. But yeah, it would be difficult to lose him. It would be tough on the league. I don't think it reflects poorly on the league. I don't think it says anything negative about the league. It would just be a loss for the league because I don't know how you say it is negative to the league. We can't keep these people, whether just because he's Canadian, the appeal for the money in the United States is one you can't beat. You know, there was in the 60s and 70s, the CFL paid more money than the NFL did. And everyone came up here because money, you follow the money. And that's what it is. And until the Canadian Football League can start paying tens of millions of dollars in salaries, it's going to happen. That's not a reflection of the Canadian Football League. We don't promote the Canadian Football League in the media. We don't preach it in our homes. We don't hype it up in the news. And it's tough to get there. It would be so unfortunate, though, to lose Nathan Rourke when we didn't get to see him lift a Grey Cup. I think that's what we all wanted.
Except for me.
Except for you.
Well, no, insufferable adults did not want him to. There was a part of me that really wanted to. I felt bad for the kid after the game. He was like, yes, doing your all congratulatory hugs, and then seeing him in tears, it was like, can we just get a do-over and just let him win? Like literally, that really, it just hurt. So before we get in here, this is, if you just tuned in, you're waiting for this one part of the podcast, Grey Cup 109. And now feels like the perfect time to bring up our partnership with Sports Interaction, made for Canadians to bet on Canadian products, especially with the Grey Cup 109. Go to SIA.com/Rouge. If your first deposit will be matched up to 125%. Drop $50. That Sports Interaction will add an additional $75. So that gives you $125 to drop all on Winnipeg to cover the spread. If you want. Okay. Well, all right. So Grey Cup 109, the Toronto Argonauts against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Bombers are favored by 6 points at this time. When the week opened, they actually only favored by 4.5. So right now that spread is widening. The over-ender set at 48 points. The storylines: Andrew Harris versus the understudy of Brady Oliveira, both Winnipeg running backs. Ryan Dinwiddie, former Bomber quarterback, made his start in the 2007 Grey Cup, where another storyline happened, where Kevin Glenn back in 2007 was injured in the divisional final. Similar thing happened almost in the Western Final. We didn't talk about it, but it's a huge story. Zach Collaros rolled up on his ankle. Didn't show up for practice earlier today, but everybody seems to believe that he is good to go. I'm willing to bet that by the time that tomorrow's practice ends, which is close to the public, they're going to be shooting them up with some kind of painkillers or what have you, to the point where he can't feel anything, circa Chris Strevler back in 2019 with his broken foot. You got that storyline. We mentioned last week, Toronto, Winnipeg have not played in the Grey Cup since 1950. Another storyline, Toronto, 6 straight Grey Cup wins. Their last Grey Cup loss was 1987 to the Edmonton Football Club, which was led by, I believe, one Matt Dunnigan, and I believe, I could be wrong, Damon Allen. We might have actually had Tracy Ham there too as well. I could be mistaken at that point, but that was back when Edmonton had a plethora of running quarterbacks back in the late 80s. So with all these storylines, Winnipeg favored by 6 points. Tony, where do you want to go with this one?
I'm thinking Winnipeg covers that, and I'm taking the over in this one. As much as I want to sit here and pile a load of crap about how close this football game is going to be, I don't think it is. I had no problem picking Toronto in the East. I thought they were the best in the East. I don't think they have the weapons anywhere across the board to compete with this Winnipeg Blue Bombers team. And we can microanalyze offensive lines in the playoffs at the end of the seasons. We can microanalyze everything. At the end of the day, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are just an amazing football team. They only had to play one playoff game, and they took care of the best team after them in the West. I think BC was clearly better than the Calgary Stampeders were for the season. That's why they went on. BC and Calgary had a good battle back and forth for that second place spot, but it was always going to be BC. And there was a couple of hiccups against the East, against Montreal and Hamilton. Those weren't the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. That's just crap that happens in a 20-week season. I could go on the story. The storylines are what they are, but I don't think they're going to contribute. Andrew Harris might have a great afternoon. We might be talking about Andrew Harris. Who even knows? Andrew Harris is the first opposition player to win Outstanding Canadian or something like that. That would make a great side story as well. I don't think there's enough on Toronto for me to come out here and say we're going to have a close football game. Toronto's got what it takes to give Winnipeg a hard time. I want this to be a classic. I don't think it's going to. I think it's going to be a wire-to-wire win for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I feel blowout coming. I feel like for some reason, ever since we found out the two teams, all I keep running through my head is the 1997 Grey Cup. Now, Toronto was a little bit stronger than the Saskatchewan Roughriders were at that time. Saskatchewan was kind of like a fluke to get in there, and Toronto dismantled them easily. I don't think Toronto is like that Saskatchewan team. I just see a stacked Winnipeg team is going to go into Regina and just take the Argonauts apart. I'm sorry. I just do.
When I look at, like, if I'm looking at each team and each core, it's okay. Yeah, Winnipeg has the better quarterback. I think they have the better running tandem. And I think it's clear that they have the better offensive line. Their receiving group, probably close, but if you had a gun to my head, I'd maybe even pick Toronto. Dalton is showing as good as he is probably the best receiver in the league, and he's playing. Is he enough to counter what Toronto's going to be able to throw at him? Curly Gittins Jr., Tavares Daniels, and if he's playing Eric Rogers, I don't know if he's limited. they've got other weapons in the air game. Markeith Ambles, and of course you've got the two running backs, through the air too as well, just similar to what Winnipeg does. Defensively, though, that's a different story. Wynton McManus did not practice. I tell you what, if Wynton McManus is playing, I think it's closer than it probably should be. But when you look defensively for what Toronto does, they've got Royce Mechie. I don't know what he's going to do. Enoch Mwamba, Wynton McManus. Compared to what Winnipeg is going to be able to throw them, Adam Bighill. Is Willie Jefferson and Jackson Jeffcoat, are they going to be enough to force Toronto to go one-dimensional? They've been having decent seasons, not great seasons for their standards, but I think this team has enough experience to be like, okay, let's say if Toronto goes up 14-0, they can come back. I think they have enough experience in championship games to know that you might be up 14-0, but we can just put a couple of drives together, or we can make that key stop. I don't know if. See, when you say that, even if Winnipeg clearly has the edge in every group that we can name, I don't know if it's by a clear favorite for each group. So with that being said, I think Toronto's going to make it closer than you think. I think this is going to be. I'm trying to think. I think this is going to be like the 2018 Grey Cup or Calgary, where you just knew that Winnipeg is going to win or Calgary was going to win, but Ottawa's just somehow stuck around. And I think this is going to be that way. And I think Winnipeg is going to win. You're going to see Janarian Grant with a return touchdown, just like Terry Williams did for Calgary back then. It's going to maybe look ugly, maybe. But, when it comes to Grey Cup games, it doesn't matter. You don't go for style points. You go for finishing points. So at the end of the day, I think Toronto covers, but Winnipeg wins this one, fulfilling dynasty. And therefore, Insufferable Daltz makes an appearance next week. Winnipeg Blue Bombers win, but Toronto covers the spread. And I'm going to go the under. I think when you go into last week, clearly offensively, Winnipeg, the elements were an issue. They just handled it a little bit better than how BC did. The elements in Saskatchewan is a little bit different than the elements in Toronto. So I think Toronto is going to have some issue with the Regina weather. And I think that might be the thing that Winnipeg needs just to come out on top. So Winnipeg wins, Toronto covers, and take the under. I don't know how you got the over in this one, to be honest with you, with the elements. That might be something you might have to go to Twitter to explain. Well, that'll wrap it up, episode 459. And of course, this is powered by the Canadian Football Podcast Network. Tony, any final thoughts before we head out?
Nothing. Just enjoy the Grey Cup. 109. Have a great time. Get together with friends. Enjoy the football. And watch it for the history. Watch it for the first 3P champion in Canada since the mid-'80s.
Yeah, I love Twitter, but I'm going to pause the music here for a second here. It is amazing, and I don't know if I'm taking this personal, but it is amazing how, because I think because it's Winnipeg, everybody's just losing their crap because Winnipeg is doing the 3P. Yeah. Like every fan base, like I understand people want people want the better team to lose. They want parity, and I get that. Mm-hmm. But it just seems there's some people that are like extra salty because Winnipeg is on the verge of a dynasty, and there's like, oh, the league's gonna collapse because if Winnipeg wins. Did they not remember the 80s? With like Edmonton won 5 in a row. Like how? Like if social media was alive back then. Like when people were like, oh, Edmonton just won their 4th in a row. Oh, Edmonton just won their 5th in a row. Oh, the league's going to collapse by the 90s. Well, it almost did. Maybe that's a bad metaphor, but no. I don't know. It just seems that like we all want that parity, that the better team maybe not win, and I get it. Like everybody all of a sudden turned into anti-Patriots fans when Tom Brady and the Patriots in the NFL had their like 20-year run where they were constantly in the Final Four. But nobody really just kind of went off on Patriots fans, right? They didn't want like they just they didn't say that, oh, the Patriots are going to go win another Super Bowl. The NFL is going to go collapse. It just seems it's stupid that people are going to think that the league's going to collapse because one team just happens to have better management than the other. I don't know. That's my rant for the day. I don't know if you have a take on it. Well, that'll do it for episode 459, powered by the Canadian Football Podcast Network. Again, if you're live on social media, if you're live on Twitter, you can follow us on Twitter at Rouge Radio, myself at Rouge Daltz. Tony can be followed at Tony Rouge, and of course, Facebook at facebook.com/Rouge Radio. And of course, this podcast, as well as others, are going to be uploaded on YouTube. For Tony, I'm Daltz. Thanks for listening. We will see you next week to talk
Thanks
breakup.
for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.